everybody, and welcome back to Morbid Movies. And I just took Mary's spot. Mary was just about to do it. You go ahead, Mary. What are we? To the intro.
Stepping on my Kool-Aid, dog.
Yeah.
All right. Hello and welcome to Morbid Movies, the podcast where we discuss movies that appeal to the strange and unusual. I am your host, Mary, and with me, as always, are my co-hosts who have made a promise not to eat each other at the end of the world. It's Dom and Jim.
Yo, Merry, but not Merry. Happy Merry New Year, everybody. 2026. Is everybody excited? You got any New Year's resolutions, Jim and Mary? Let me have them. What are your resolutions for this year?
I don't have any resolutions. I think typically people set themselves up for failure, planning something at the beginning of the year, saying I'm going to do X, Y, Z, and then just not. So yeah, I'm just going to take it as it comes.
Cool. Mary, got anything?
One more time around the sun. That's what we're doing.
Love it. Yeah, I'm pretty much the same. Delicatessen, meanwhile, is another Morbid movie excellently picked by Jim. This was really interesting, and it's one that I honestly wasn't looking forward to watching first, and actually got into it. It had a very small budget and then made quite a lot of money. I think it was 3.8 million budget and 12.4 million. So, and it led to a lot of success for the people behind it. So why did you bring Delicatessen to us and to Morbid Movies? And what is your fascination with it? And why did you want to talk about it today?
Well, I brought it because I'm a big fan of Jean-Pierre Jeunet, and his work is something that I've enjoyed over the years, but I haven't actually seen any of his movies in a long time. Like, I think this was the most recent. That was over 10 years ago. So I was looking to revisit some of his work, and this gave me an excuse. Delicatessen is about cannibals in the post-apocalypse, so I thought it would fit perfectly into this podcast. And it also kind of helps bring, work that you wouldn't have seen to your eyes, and hopefully you get something new out of this.
Interesting inspirations for Jeunet as well. I think he got the idea for a cannibal butcher when living in an apartment above a butcher's shop. Mary, that was one of your facts when you were doing the research. I thought that was fantastic. For me, it's even though it's post-apocalyptic and even though it's cannibals, I was like, I don't know, man. I've had some pretty shitty landlords in my time, and I'm pretty sure that some of them wanted to carve me up at one point or another. So I thought it was a really interesting concept for a film. When you were looking at these facts, Mary, what really stood out to you as someone that was also, from what I'm aware of, as far as I'm aware, discovering this film for the first time?
Interesting one, because I remember seeing the cover art for this film like in rental stores when those were a thing, and kind of steering away from it because it's not the film I expected it to be based on what the premise is. So it was kind of interesting for me to discover this is something I liked a lot more than I thought I would. Inspiration just coming from sort of like an everyday thing in life, like an inside joke with his girlfriend about their apartment, does kind of what am I trying to say here? I think it provides a nice insight because this film does feel very like intimate and personal as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there is, and we'll talk about that in terms of the scenes because we've all got differing favorite scenes in this film. One of the other facts I noted, and I want sort of Jim to touch on this, is many friends and family of the directors appeared in this because the budget was so small, and they kind of made it work with that strict budget. And I do think we can see that in the film. I think in terms of, I think it's very clever, but the color, I think it does have a gritty feel, if that makes sense, not to sound too art house in my description, but it does have a very gritty feel, Jim. Is that does that appeal to you as well? The fact that they had a small budget, they made a lot of things work with very little, and actually it led to again, as we talked about in the intro, great success for pretty much everybody involved. They moved on to other things off the back of this. So is that one of the things that appealed to you, Jim?
Well, I think it definitely worked in their favor because we're talking about a post-apocalypse. Everything's supposed to look worn down and used. And, by getting everything secondhand, it means that they don't have to do that themselves in the art department. Everything's already threadbare and falling apart. I'm not sure where they found the building, but the building looked pretty old and dilapidated too. So yeah, everything just kind of fit with the style of the post-apocalypse.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that, before we do favorite scenes and things like that, there's some really nice talking points that I wanted to touch on. And the first was like the use of color throughout the yellows, reds, and greens, this kind of sickly, again, post-apocalyptic, but also cannibalistic vibe of the film. I think it's expressed within the colors and the general kind of aesthetic of the film. Um, do you have anything to sort of say on that respect on an aesthetic level?
Yeah, color does a lot to help ground like the setting of the film, like that post-apocalyptic feel, because there is like sort of just like a miasma, where it's like the air looks like there's been a gas attack that never fully cleared off, and it's led to probably, ecological issues as well, which contribute to that food shortage that's clearly going on. I think there is one conversation in the film where they're talking about like waiting for things to grow back. So I think it does add to that kind of sickly feeling of decay, that things aren't going well. And Also, like, there's that change, like, without trying to spoil the film, at the end, where that color palette does seem to brighten significantly at the end of the film, because as dark as the film is, it feels a little hopeful at the end.
The visual aspect of this and the aesthetic was so striking, and like we said, really complements the concept and the vibe of the film.
Well, I mean, Genet uses a lot of yellow in general. If you look at any of his films, he's really big into yellow, but it's interesting how he uses it differently because Amelie is a very warm and kind of sunny movie,
That's true.
and a very long engagement. He kind of uses it as a little bit of a sepia tone kind of style to make the film look older. Whereas here, it very is, or the yellow is very much in that yellow to green spectrum. So it does look more sickly than those movies. I also think it helps with that worn atmosphere because as things wear down, they tend to yellow. So by throwing that overcast on there, it does look like everything's kind of beat down and falling apart.
Yeah, yeah. Again, fantastic work on that, and again, it was something that just struck me massively. The second is the sound design. I thought the sound, throughout the whole film, which we'll talk about in again my favorite scene, and many others in this, was fantastic. Some of the best sound design I've actually actually experienced in a film. Maybe I was a little bit more taken with it because I hadn't seen this before and hadn't really heard of it before, so it was very much, it was a very fresh experience for me. But I thought the sound design was fantastic. The water scenes, of course, in the later part of the film, and the sort of rush of water was just like, even though it's, obviously it's a very common visual, running water in the context in the context of the film, quite chaotic. But just, yeah, I just thought there was so much good sound design in this film. Did you guys get that too? Was it remarkable to both of you?
The sound design on this film is definitely notable. I liked it's like the sound almost sometimes becomes its own character, and it does really like help to again bring you into the atmosphere. It's one of the things about this film. It's like the sound and everything else really do kind of make you feel like you are drawn in, like you are there experiencing these moments in a way that I find a lot of films don't pull off. So I think that way the sound is really tied into the actions of what's happening in the film, the way it is, does help with that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, and that moves on nicely to, my favorite scene, and we'll do favorite scenes now. The intercourse scene, with. And the sort of beats and the musical element of it, where these household props are being used concurrently in this kind of smorgasbord of sound. It's, it starts with something simple like the painting, and then moves on to the carpet being beaten, obviously the act of sex itself. Then of course everybody else gets involved, the musical instruments, obviously musical instruments such a key part of this narrative as well. There's a heavy musical aspect to this film I'd never seen anything like it. And I watch a lot of music, and I've seen a lot of films, a lot of musical films, but this was dark. This was a little bit, there was a little bit of tension in it as well, but it was also kind of funny, and I think that's probably the vibe they're going for, a little bit tense but also a little bit comedic. And so that is definitely my favorite scene. I wonder if you guys anything to add to that, and also obviously if you give your favorite scene as well.
Sure. Well, to start with your scene, you asked if I wanted to add anything. I think that a big reason that that scene works is because of the editing. And I think this movie actually won the French César in 1991 for Best Editing. Probably in part because of that scene. It just sticks with you. My favorite scene, so I've actually got two. Well, one is a scene and one is little vignettes, but I really like the date between Louison and Julie because it's actually kind of a cute moment in an otherwise sea of insanity. But it's also, there's a lot of physical comedy going on there because she's not wearing her glasses. She's essentially blind, trying to serve tea and desserts. And she's basically pouring tea in his lap, and he's moving cups and plates around, stacking stuff, trying to be polite while also, not getting a lap full of hot tea. I also really like the small vignettes with Aurora, who's the married woman who is hearing voices. She thinks she's going insane, so she's trying to herself with these really elaborate Rube Goldberg devices. And it's incredibly macabre humor, but it's hilarious how elaborate they are. And they always seem to fail on her, much to her chagrin.
Mary, your favorite scene and why, please?
I really liked, first of all, that introductory opening scene where you're seeing the guy taping bits of newspaper and scraps to himself and sneaking down the stairs and trying to get away in the garbage can. Like, that whole sequence, I think, does a good job of capturing the tone of the film because it is sort of tense and frightening, and there's a lot of horror to it, but it's also comical. Like, and I feel like some of this really is sort of like this film's very French in a lot of ways, but I enjoyed that scene a lot, and also the scene in the hallway where the main character is doing the tricks with the soap bubbles. Just like that weird moment of whimsy in a pretty otherwise desolate setting, I think is really fun because there is a lot of push and pull with the like how bleak things are, but the way that life still goes on. Like, I also noticed that like the guys in the shop making those, I don't know what they're called, the toys that when you turn them over they make the groaning sound. Like, that seems like an absolutely bizarre job to have in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. Like, who's buying those? Is there a need for those? Like, a lot of it feels like people are just going through the habit of life because what else do you do? Even at the end of the world, you need a job.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I found that very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Very French, very, very, very French in its execution. But again, something that I would, to certain people, I would definitely recommend this, and I'm really proud that we could at least highlight it in a small way on this podcast because I do think it is something everybody should at least experience. I can't think of too many sort of bigger pop culture films to compare it to. Obviously, I would go as far as to say, like, you got the the Genetic Opera, but that's not. I would say that's less accessible than this film, even though it's an American film. The Human Centipede uses similar color stuff, but again, I would say Delicatessen is way more accessible than the Human Centipede, and both of those films I wouldn't go about recommending to movie fans and movie goers. The other one is Dark City, which ever since Jim introduced me to that film has become one of my favorite films, and we've obviously covered it. I think it was the first episode we did on this podcast. Those are my three that I would say you could make a slim argument as somewhat similar, but again, with exception to Dark City, not very accessible. Do you have any sort of challenge to that? Any sort of a different take on films that people might know a bit more that you would compare it to in terms of, I don't know, vibe, concept, aesthetic?
Yeah, well, I think in terms of like silly absurdity, it matches up really well with 80s Terry Gilliam. Specifically Brazil, but also kind of in that Time Bandits realm. Brazil is a wacky comedy that's about a dystopia, so it kind of overlaps nicely. I think also in terms of look and some of the art house vibes, it reminds me a lot of Barton Fink by the Coen brothers. Kind of a lesser known of the Coen brothers work, but it's kind of similar in that a writer is trapped inside. He's not trapped, he can actually leave, but he's in a hotel, stuck in a hotel with a really yellow overcast. It's a very surreal, absurd film. And it feels like he's in his own personal hell.
Certainly what I'll do, as the followers of this podcast will note, I tend to put images and visuals over the top. So I'll make sure to reference what you're talking about, because again, I do think that if people are interested in this film, these are good signposts to check out.
The 80s Gilliam vibes, I picked up a lot of that too, and with your Dark City point as well. I think obviously some differences, but Dark City, I feel, also has a lot of that kind of like vintage dark aesthetic, a little bit more towards the noir detective film kind of look for Dark City, obviously, but it definitely seems to have like the same spiritual well that they're drawing from there. I don't think there's any other films I can really compare it to. This one just does feel so unique to me because it's not even like other cannibal films that I've seen have a very different vibe from this one. So one of the things I noticed is this film's not gross like cannibal films usually are, because you know how they usually have a lot of like people eating really greasy, saucy looking meat, and there's a lot of like viscera tearing with teeth and stuff like that usually, and there's remarkably little eating in general in this film, much less like they're very it kind of feels more like it's a film about people who happen to be cannibals than a film about cannibalism. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I started watching it, I was like, I'm going to be as grossed out. Again, once we talk about the aesthetic and the sound design and everything, I was like, I'm going to be as grossed out as when I saw The Human Centipede, which is with a bullet the worst film I've ever seen. It's way more accessible than something like that. And also, again, my other pick was Repo the Genetic Opera, which has its niche if you're a fan of industrial music and similar color schemes, but an aesthetic. But again, I would say this is way more accessible and way more appreciated on a wider scale. Jim highlighted so much of this is visual comedy. A lot of it is facial expressions, and physical comedy. Favorite performers in this and why? I think so many people deserve props for their the physicality of their performances and all facial expressions, things like that. Mary, thoughts on favorite performer if you can?
Choose is like you said, there's a lot of like skillful acting in this, but I would probably have to go with Dominique Pinon, and I hope I pronounced that right, playing Louison, just because I think that he really was just perfect for the role and did kind of bring a interesting light to it and played the physical comedy very well. So that would probably be my favorite if I have to choose.
Yeah, very, very similar. Pignon playing Louison, fantastic. Obviously, Jean-Claude Dreyfus as well. The Butcher, Marie-Laure Dougnac, pardon my pronunciation. Again, all of these people, such wonderful facial expressions, such great characters that really add to, again, the surrealist nature of this film. And a lot of this film, isn't the dialogue. It's so much about the aesthetic and so much about that, again, as you alluded to, Mary, that physical performance.
So I like Dominique Pinon as well. He is in pretty much all of Genet's movies, and he plays a really wide, diverse range of roles. But in this movie in particular, I'd have to give it to Jean-Claude Dreyfus. I found watching these movies with you guys that I tend to like the villains a lot. They seem to have really meaty roles. And I think that Dreyfus really drives a lot of the zaniness in this movie. He's really a guy that seems to enjoy his work as a butcher. Like he's not eating people because he has to. He really just wants to eat people.
Yeah, you can see the joy in his face, and it's fascinating again how these actors can take something so visceral, so dark, and obviously a very harrowing concept and turn it into an act of joy. So yeah, very, very well done. Rounding up then, are there any additional facts that I've missed from your research, Mary or Jim, as a fan? Obviously we're doing this so that we can bring this film to more people, hopefully. Any additional facts that either of you would like to mention, or do you think we've covered everything enough?
This film in a lot of ways is not completely directly, but is an exploration of France and Europe under German occupation during World War II, and that has a heavy influence on this film, not just in the resistance that's living in the sewers in this post-apocalyptic world, but also just like when you look at it, like the character of the butcher who enjoys what he does is definitely like a fascist figure who's using fear to control everybody else, and then the tenants of the apartment are complacent or they're collaborating in different ways, and even to the point where he has a mistress who would be like many French women in World War II who were accused of what they called a horizontal collaboration, where they were sleeping with German soldiers in order to get food and privileges to survive. But also as well as the people who just simply look the other way out of fear and things like that. So I think that's an interesting approach to working through that. And I think that typifies a lot of French films of that era in the 90s were exploring that, how some people resisted and some people capitulated during the fascist occupation. And I actually ended up going down quite the Wikipedia rabbit hole after watching this film, just thinking about that. So I did want to touch on that quickly.
You both mentioned Dark City. If you think that this movie overlapped with Dark City, you should really check out City of Lost Children, because there's more of an overlap. That film's a little bit higher budget. It's more ambitious, but it's just as wild as this one. Very, very unique visual style. But I think that people should just check out Genet's work in general, because I think he's a fantastic visual director. He's got a very eclectic and unique style.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's an interesting sort of question to shoehorn in. A great example of someone that's done something, at least at first, that was considered quite niche, and then gone on to do, Amelie, globally renowned, The City of Lost Children, which I haven't seen, but again, as we've said, it's made me very curious to check out more work from Genet. What do you think that communicates to fans of film, but also, perhaps creatives? Because, it does show that you can go on from something quite niche, quite dark, and then create other films. Obviously, Genet became very successful with other films. Do you think that's a positive example? Not to get too abstract with this question, but do you think that's a good example for filmmakers and for creatives, that you can do something that is niche, you can do something that's a little bit off kilter, and again, for, quite heavy themes, really, and actually become, a mainstream success? I wonder if that's a little bit over the top from myself, but is there anything you'd like to add to that, or is that maybe a bit of a reach on my part? That's a question. Jim, any thoughts on that?
I don't think it's a reach. I mean, I think it's something that you actually see. I don't want to say fairly often, but it is something that you see, somewhat common in filmmaking. Like, think of Peter Jackson, who was directing gore horror movies or movies with syphilitic puppets, and now he's doing he did Lord of the Rings. Or who was he? Oh, James Gunn, who was directing trauma movies and is now directing Superman. So I think that what it shows more than anything is that talent kind of carries across genre or content or things like that. That if you're talented directing niche movies, that you could be very talented directing big budget movies or broader, more appealing movies that could, be shown to general audiences.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Mary, anything to add to that?
Being able to work on something that's more niche and even has like limitations can be a great way to actually showcase your skill, because you do have to find creative solutions to, make a good film and achieve your vision. And you can't just paper over that with a huge budget. You actually have to, be creative and be passionate about your work. So that can a lot of times be a huge indicator to me that someone has the ability to perform on a wide variety of projects if they're able to make it work on something smaller like this.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, yeah, a good positive ending note there, I think, for people. And again, check this film out, City of Lost Children, of course, as well, by Genet. And some of the other films we mentioned. In fact, if you want to check out Dark City, we have done a video on that. It was the very first video, like we said, of Morbid Movies. So a good way to promote some of our work. And yes, thank you both for your time. It is, of course, January 2026. So we have a busy year ahead, all of us, respectively. Thank you to everybody that watches these podcasts and supports us as well. It means a lot, because again, we're just fans of weird, spooky, creepy cannibalistic films. What film are we doing next, Mary?
So next film, next month, it is my turn to pick. So we are going to be doing the 2013 film Under the Skin.
Yeah, what else what do we say when we finish up? Jim, I always like it when you do it, so it just sounds sexy. Not that it doesn't sound sexy when you not it doesn't sound sexy when you do it, Mary. I think it's just something about Jim's dulcet tones.
Let's see how it is.
Yeah. Jim, see us out.
Keep it spooky.